Throughout history, our most epic sociocultural meltdowns have served as forcing functions of change. And not just any change, but the kind of change that cracks open the levees of creative and innovative breakthroughs. For instance, in the Middle Ages, the Black Death rather eerily paved the path for the Italian Renaissance. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the scientific revolution and Enlightenment rose up in direct response to the shadowy tyranny of the Catholic Church. Fast forward a few centuries, and the carnage of World War I birthed the counterculture of the Roaring Twenties, with its emphasis on sensual pleasures. In 1918, the Spanish flu inspired both the location and motifs of the Harlem Renaissance. And, more recently, the dissociated panic induced by 9/11 strangely and unpredictably blossomed into the pop culture boom of the 2000s. Of course, this alchemy of dark stimulus to light outcome does not only take place on a collective level, but a personal one as well. For example, during the Great Plague of London, 20-something-year-old Isaac Newton was forced into quarantine, resulting in his Annus Mirabilis, his Year of Wonders, that bore his theories on motion and universal gravitation, calculus and optics, among others. Or take Abraham Lincoln, who, amidst the backdrop of the Civil War, translated the unique abilities and perspectives conferred onto him by his clinical depression to pave the path toward emancipation. In short, personal and collective breakthroughs often don't happen despite the darkness, but because of it. And needless to say, we are living in a rather dark era. While some rightly note that the world may not be quite as dark as it appears based on the unrelenting effects of social media, news coverage, and our handheld doom machines, it is safe to say that the past few years have been murkier than most. Which means, if history is any predictor of the future, we are rounding the bend of a renaissance of our own. You see, the breakthroughs that are born from a dark night tend to be inspired by the social, economic, psychological, and political adjustments forced into place by the sordid state of affairs. For instance, if not for World War I's resultant discontentment with American values and societal depression that sought an outlet for dopaminergic release, the Roaring Twenties would not have taken root with such fervor. This is not to say that we should be grateful for the death and destruction of war, but instead that the darkness of war contained a redeeming seed, one that ripened into the fruit of an anything-goes, artistically stimulating, literally intoxicating era. So, what fruit will be born of our current dark era? As we consider the most significant disruptions over these past few years, the laundry list is lengthy, to be sure. But perhaps the most ubiquitous and influential response is the way we worked. As the COVID-19 pandemic raged, workplaces boarded their windows, literally and metaphorically, and turned to remote work to stay afloat. While this adjustment was and continues to be a source of stress for many, there was a silver lining to be found amidst the countless patchy Zoom calls. It has allowed workers to reconsider their careers, short and long-term goals, and quality of life. In a peculiar plot twist, the mandatory remote work policies dosed employees in a slow and unintentional manner with the tantalizing tonic of schedule flexibility, among other previously untasted luxuries. These logistical and emotional perks, along with wage stagnation, a rising cost of living, and other compounding factors, like the millions suffering from the effects of long COVID, has led to an exodus of epic proportions, catchily titled the Great Resignation. And thus, the fruit of our current dark era is emerging as a drastic shift in not only the way we work, but why we work. Quite provocatively, this series of events has happened before. Enter the Italian Renaissance. You see, in the aftermath of the Black Death, there were changes to the way Italians worked. For instance, labor-intensive farming was overtaken by an increase in industry, with survivors of the plague benefiting from an increase in salary and quality of living. But there were also seismic shifts in why they worked. As a culture, Italians became obsessed with the concept of death and fixated on the notion that humanity was not long for this world, a theme that inspired artistic motifs of the era. But this fear of death was not purely dark. It also led them to savor the pleasures of life, beauty of nature, and crumbs of happiness to be found within the human experience. The plague's concentrated experience of death and despair, in a paradox similar to the current moment, counterintuitively led to the prioritization of pleasures and the enjoyment of life. With the elite classes lining the pockets of artists like Botticelli and Da Vinci with golden florins, there was a renewed emphasis on fulfillment and joy through the creative process. To complement this artistic boon, other entrepreneurial professions blossomed amidst the Renaissance, like merchant trade and craftsmanship guilds, resulting in a creative epoch that nostalgics like myself wistfully swoon over. Just as the Black Death inspired the Italian Renaissance, so too has COVID-19 inspired the Great Resignation. Lest you think the mass exodus from work is a self-indulgent millennial or Gen Z trend, what we are instead witnessing is a repetition of history prompted by an instinct we share as a species, the impulse to create. Quite intuitively, today's workforce has rightly recognized that genuine fulfillment can be found through entrepreneurial and creative work. What we are remembering is that our minds, bodies, and spirits feel more content when we create in an autonomous, self-empowered manner. Evolutionarily speaking, we are instinctually compelled to create, not only for practical reasons like stitching a loincloth to keep warm, but for psychological and existential reasons that impact our well-being. For instance, creation offers improved mental health and well-being. People who are involved in creative pursuits benefit from enhanced mental health and well-being as they are able to use the creative work to boost positive emotions and reduce negative emotions. In a self-propelling manner, creative pursuits enhance positive feelings, which in turn feeds creativity. As a bonus, creative work also doses the brain's pleasure pathways. Hello, my dopamine-motivated friends. Creation also offers self-actualization. Self-actualizers are defined as people who live creatively and use their potentialities fully. They find a way to tap into and express the inherent nature that is indubitably theirs. Thus, entrepreneurial and creative work can be an ideal pathway to nudge along the process of self-actualization. People who self-select into creative work tend to be adventuresome, autonomous, self-teaching, and willing to face rejection, all qualities of self-actualizers. And entrepreneurial individuals are more likely than employees to use their work as a means to self-actualize. Last but certainly not least, creation also offers impact and legacy. More so than employees, entrepreneurial individuals feel a strong desire to receive credit for and claim ownership over their work. While some may write this off as selfishness, The urge to claim one's own body of work is fundamentally rooted in the human desire to leave a legacy. Similarly, entrepreneurial individuals are more likely to use their work as a means to achieve a better life for their children, ensuring the survival of future generations, a sentiment that is as old as it is tender. In this moment, when we are so acutely aware of the fleeting nature of life, as well as the opportunities that sit outside our soul-sucking cubicles, entrepreneurial endeavors can offer a balm that our zombified spirits are parched for. Prompted by the darkness of recent days, we are perhaps more willing than ever to risk the potential discomfort of a flight from paychecks to paint the canvas of our own potential. And thus, we are in for a renaissance of entrepreneurship. As self-employment dances further into the center ring, we will be challenged to expand our definition of entrepreneurship. While many presume entrepreneurship to be a Silicon Valley venture-backed phenomenon reserved for those with Jeff Bezos-level risk tolerance, the reality is self-employed psychologists, pizza shop owners, and woodworkers are entrepreneurs too. With any luck, we will also witness a movement away from the pornographic coverage of tech entrepreneurs, with its glorification of 2 big checks and 22-year-old founders, and move towards an inclusive, holistic vision that democratizes entrepreneurship. This renaissance will likely not only bring about practical changes, like services that make starting a company easier or incentives to start small businesses, but changes to our sense of identity and purpose in relation to the objects of our creation. As more and more of us taste the ambrosia that is the process of turning ourselves inside out through the creative act, we may slowly but surely shift the dialogue away from "what do you do?" or "how much do you make?" and toward "what do you create?" and "how does it make you feel?" In this brave new world, we will have the opportunity to define entrepreneurialism for ourselves, becoming the modern-day version of the Italian Renaissance's artisans, like painters and sculptors, tradesmen and shopkeepers, like millers, tailors, and brewers, and merchants, like traders and salespeople. After all, today's entrepreneurialism is simply a 21st century manifestation of our ancient legacy of craftsmanship. We are now returning to what we have always been, vessels through which creation flows forth. So, to conclude, I'll leave you with just one thought. As we emerge from this dark era, what will your renaissance be?